Welcome to MPS Music Podcast Series. This is DJ LED coming at you from Market Street, Indianapolis, downtown, near Monument Circle, near the tree. That's what we're at today. A lot of the stuff that I am into is from when I was growing up. I think that's how everybody is, pretty much. The stuff you listen to when you were about 10 to maybe about 16 or 17, that's the stuff that sticks with you the most, at least in the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. You start to wonder if you're just out of touch, if you don't have any idea what's going on in the world anymore, especially someone as myself who listens to music, plays music. I'm very involved in music, and yet I've got a 10-year-old son who shows me at least once a day something new that I don't know about, that I've never heard of. And that's scary because I used to be hip to everything. I used to be onto the latest, the greatest, whatever was happening. And we all go through that as adults. Whether you have kids or not, we all go through that. We all experience those times when we suddenly feel like we are square. I think the key to staying relevant in these days and times is to not worry about whether or not you are hip, whether or not I'm in touch with what the kids are doing. That's really the last thing on my mind, actually. And I'll tell you why. Because of the cyclical nature of music, pop music. I mean, let's not forget that this has only been something for maybe about 100 years that we've been experimenting with the whole idea of recording music. Before then, it was all about you went to a theater and you watched somebody conducting Mozart's operas or operettas, Beethoven's symphonies. If you go as far back as when the composers were alive, you went to go see them perform it. The first time that people were able to hear themselves back and hear what they sounded like, hear what the music sounded like, that's revolutionary, because now you don't have to go out to a public performance anymore. Of course, it helps if you do. We all agree watching live music is way better than watching music on TV or in the comfort of your own home or in your car. Or is it? Is live music really that much better than pre-recorded music that you get to listen to on your car, on your phone, anytime that you want? I've really begun to wonder about this, whether or not pre-recorded music is not infinitely better than the live experience. I've been to a couple concerts recently. A lot of times it sucks to go and see a live band. You've got to deal with parking and the humongous line of people all trying to get home at the same time. You've got people who smell, people who are loud, people who disgust you in every other way except for the fact that they listen to the same band as you. That's a pretty good argument against the live experience. You know, we're sitting on the lawn at Ruoff, and it's great and all. It's awesome. The sound is good. But I just feel like I'm sneaking cable from, like, my neighbor or peeking over the wall at somebody else's show. I'm not really there. I saw Billie Eilish on Jimmy Kimmel's show the other night, and he listed her bands like Run DMC, Huey Lewis and the Nears, and she had no idea, no clue. But that doesn't mean that she's out of touch. It's because it's her world, and she's 17 years old and burning up the charts. She's tapping into a vein. But someday, you know, Billie Eilish is going to be trying to put stuff out, and people are going to say, no, you're not relevant. It'll happen at some point. Whether or not it stays is another thing. That's just something to be seen. But in the meantime, the best that we can do is just kind of hope that the things that come out in the future for us old fogies are not scary and too new to be enjoyable. The stuff that my son listens to, I think there's some cool stuff. And then there's some stuff that, like, you know, is obviously not meant for me. Okay, boomer. And I thought it was great. I'm not a boomer. I'm what they call a Gen Xer. I'm one of those Gen X type people. So we don't really give a damn. I've never even heard of this stuff, and he's getting it straight to his veins, almost injected immediately from the source. I mean, YouTube has just tapped him into so many different ways of enjoying things. And he went to a live concert recently to go see X Ambassadors. He had a great time, but waiting for the band to come. He was not patient. He had to stand a lot. He was tired. He's only 10 years old. He's got all this energy. And then the band came on and he was just mesmerized. In 10 years, is he going to remember this as like the greatest moment of his life? Or is he going to describe it as something like an ecstatic epiphany that caused him to change his mind about music or whatever? If he remembers it like that, I'm going to laugh and say that's not what happened. And that's the benefit of being old, is that we can say we were there and we saw it happen when it did. Driving on the way here, I was listening to 99.1, which is a radio station that you can only really hear on this side of Indy. Where I'm up on the north side, you can't really catch that station. The wattage is not good enough. But they were playing a bunch of soul and funk classics from the 60s. And even though I wasn't born until 1974, this is kind of stuff I was digging because of the sound, the way that it was recorded, the sound production. And I started to lament for a second the old days and say, man, they don't make records like this anymore. There's no James Browns, Otis Reddings, Al Greens, doing it today. Nobody's doing it the way it's supposed to be done. And then I thought about Motown, because they played the Temptations, Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me. And I thought for a moment, yeah, this is a perfect song. They just don't make them like this anymore. And then I remembered that Motown was a factory. It was a hit factory. Hitsville, USA. That was the nickname. And it was an assembly line. And they ran it like an assembly line. They ran it the way people were running car manufacturing plants in Detroit, which is, Motown is Detroit. It's the Midwest, but yeah, it's urban. And they were making hits like people make cars. And isn't that the big complaint that people have about music nowadays, is that it's put out like an assembly line, that it's manufactured for the masses, for mass consumption, and it says nothing to you personally. It's not artful. It's just this thing that's put out for the edification of the lowest common denominator. Isn't that the big complaint that we hear no matter what, anywhere we're at? That's the big complaint, right? If that's the way the classics were being made, Motown style, if that's the way that they were doing it back then we can't really complain about the music that we have now, can we? I mean, we don't like it as old people, but younger people like my kid, he loves it. That's his bread and butter. The way that they're making music now, that's the music he wants to hear. He wants to hear Post Malone. He wants to hear Travis Scott. He wants to hear Billie Eilish. He wants to hear ex-ambassadors. And he wants it to sound that way, too. He wants that production to have that, whatever they're doing in the studio these days, that's what he wants. When people like my age complain about new music, I just tell them, you're just forgetting that this is the way they did it in your day, too. They sold you a different bill of goods. Anybody who grew up in the punk rock era, the original punk rock era, was sold kind of a damaged bill of goods in terms of success. Like, if you sold out, if you crossed over, that's a bad thing. That was something you shouldn't do. That was not the game plan. If you were into punk rock to get rich and be famous and rule the world, then that was a wrong occupation. There was a lot of purists who would take you to task for that. Now punk rock has been watered down and sold to the point where it doesn't have any of that meaning anymore. But I would argue it didn't in the beginning, that the only meaning you found was what you brought to it, and depending on how early in the game you got into it, that's how much you got back. But there's a lot of old punk rockers that aren't making money off of it anymore because of that ethos, because they wanted to keep it real. And I'm all for keeping it real. I'm all for being authentic. But there's a lot of people who took authenticity and were successful with it. It's hard work. At the end of the day, it's hard work. And you want some type of reward for all of the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it. People who are above a certain age group, and I've had a couple on my past podcasts and some of the ones I've done here, people who feel that it's all garbage now, that nothing is good, I don't think they're looking in the right places. I think if you turn on your radio, you'll find things that are somewhat interesting. You're going to find things that have some import, but you're not really going to you're not going to be satisfied. And anyone who listens to the radio or turns on, Pandora or Spotify or looks at something that was posted on, some website, they want something fresh. But the irony is that sometimes in their ignorance of the past, they're going to find something that reminds them of what's going on today, then harkens back to that, and they're going to gravitate to it. So a good example I think I brought up a couple weeks ago. My son loves all this new stuff, Lil Nas X, what have you. He loves it. But he likes the Rolling Stones, and I don't know how that happened. I play the Stones, but usually I've gotten to the point where if there's something I want to hear, I just got to go and play it on my own somewhere. I just got to go into my studio and play it for myself. My kid don't want to hear that. He's not playing that. And yet here he is into the song Painted Black. All I can think is that he must have heard it in a video game, or somebody that he watches their YouTube channel was playing it, or he just came across it by accident. Either way, he's onto it now. He's found his niche with that, and that's good. I'm glad for him. He's got to discover it the same way I discovered all the cool stuff that I'm into. That's when it breaks down to taste. And on this note, I'm going to stop for now. Join me next time on my next podcast for when we talk about taste. What constitutes taste and why that's so important today. Until then, thank you so much. This is DJ LED for the music podcast series. Thanks for watching.